Here are the stitches that you can do on your sewing machine. Mine has many stitches. It's got, I think, 28. This little red mark indicates that I am on the center needle position, and that's where my needle is right now. It's in the center of the presser foot. What we're going to do right now is change it to this stitch, which is the ZigZag Stitch. They are the two most basic stitches on a sewing machine. Most sewing machines have the basic stitches, the straight stitch and the zigzag stitch. And in order to change this, we come over here, and there's two dials. There's this one that has notches on my sewing machine, it may be different on yours, and there's the hand wheel. We're going to turn this one, and we're moving this red dot over to this third stitch right here. There it is. And so now you see my needle is in a different position. It's further to the left. And before we begin sewing, we want to use the hand wheel and go down into the fabric with our needle, which you'll see happening here as I turn it. Needle is going down. It's hard to see here, but this white stitching on this green fabric is actually a serge stitch. This is not made by a sewing machine, although you can use similar stitches on a sewing machine that resemble this. What made this stitch is this machine over here. This machine has 4 spools of thread, not one, and it does not have any bobbin threads. It has loopers. For now we'll be focusing on the sewing machine and the stitch you can replicate on the sewing machine that looks like an overcast stitch or a serge stitch. As you can see, I have my needle down on my fabric, which we just did, and here is my foot pedal, which is very hard to see on the floor. I'm going to press down slowly. When you first start sewing, you need to start slow, and you're guiding the fabric. You're not pushing it, you're just making sure that it's lined up over here with whatever one of these lines is here. Just kind of hard to see. Sometimes there aren't any lines, so you have to get what's called a cloth guide or a fabric guide. And my tension is at 7. You will have to play with your tension to get it to look right, and we'll... Oh yes, before I forget, when you're using the sewing machine, you have to make sure that this lever back here, see if you can see it, this right here, it has to be down, not up. If you leave it up, look what happens. That presser foot does not have any tension whatsoever on the fabric, so you're just going to have a big tangled mess. You want it down. Here we go. And you lift the presser foot. This is very important. Make sure the needle is up out of the fabric, and you do this by turning this hand wheel. And as you turn it, the needle comes up. Make sure it's in its fullest upright position, and slide this out. Use your scissors or the thread cutter on the side, and there you have it, a zigzag stitch. Over here on the sewing machine, it will be different for every sewing machine. Here's the stitch width and the stitch length. You just have to decide which is going to be better for the fabric. The stitch width that I chose and the stitch length is not appropriate for this fabric. It is too wide, it is too long, I should say, because we're looking at it this way. This is how it comes out from the sewing machine. These stitches are too long. I need to shorten them. So I do that by coming over here, looking at the length. The length is all the way to the right. That's no good. Neither is the width. My machine happens to have stitch recommendations, the width and the length. And here it says the recommended width is 5, so let's put it on 5. This is very convenient. And the recommended length is 1.5, which is way off. it's at 4. So let's put it between the 1 and the 2. And let's try to sew it again. Now that I've changed my settings, let's try this again. See how it works. Lift the presser foot and the needle. And here we go. See how different that looks? That is very different. And it's much better for this fabric. I could probably go a little bit shorter with this length stitch. But that's pretty good. And I have a skip stitch here. That happens. And voila! That's how you do it. Now the reason that you would use a zigzag stitch is there's actually a few reasons you would use a zigzag stitch. You would use it for embroidery, which you would use this zigzag stitch to make a very thick line, and you could make very many embroidery designs, whatever your heart desires. There's a good foot for that you can use, called an applique foot, and Bernina just came out with a lovely new tool that's for embroidery people. Well, actually it's for quilters. You can also free motion embroider. It's very cool. You should check out the Bernina stitch regulator. It's awesome. Anyway, one main reason why a lot of people use the zigzag stitch is so that it stretches with your fabric. I can only do this with one hand here, but you can see my fabric is still stretching. With a straight stitch, this would not happen. This is a knit shirt, and it needs to have the zigzag stitch to stretch with movement. If you do not have this, you're going to end up with a garment that does not drape correctly, which means hang, and it will probably come apart, which is not good. This is a much stronger stitch for this kind of fabric.